One ordinary evening at a small diner changed everything for Lila, a young waitress who was struggling with life's problems. When Shaquille O'Neal, the famous basketball player, walked in, it wasn't just to order food. He left behind a piece of paper that made Lila cry, not just because she was surprised, but because it changed her life. This story shows the power of kindness and how it can bring hope and make dreams come true. Lila bent down to fix her apron. Her hands moved quickly, cleaning up crumbs from the tables and gathering coffee cups. The diner was small and quiet in a little town in Georgia. It wasn't special, but for Lila, it was her world. This job wasn't just work. It was everything. It helped her get by. At 26 years old, Lila had been through so much in her life. She was a single mom to 6-year-old Eli, a boy with big, bright eyes. She worked hard every day to make sure Eli had everything he needed. She couldn't afford to take a break. Every day when Eli was asleep, Lila got up early and worked all day, earning just enough to pay the rent and buy food and clothes for Eli. She made sure he always had something to eat, and that he never felt like they didn't have enough. When Eli smiled, it made everything worth it, but sometimes when he asked, "Mommy, why isn't our house like my friend's house?" Lila could only smile even though it hurt. She didn't have the perfect answer, but she promised herself that Eli would never feel like he was missing out. Lila worked long hours from early in the morning to late at night. Her feet ached, but she always smiled at the customers. That smile was her way of hiding how tired she really was. She knew that no matter how exhausted she felt, she couldn't stop. Eli needed her. Every day when Lila came home, Eli would run to her and hug her, shouting, "You're home, Mommy." That made all the tiredness disappear. But at night, when it was time to relax, Lila couldn't stop worrying. There were bills on the kitchen table, a leaky faucet she couldn't afford to fix, and thoughts about Eli's future that kept her awake. "I can't give up," Lila whispered to herself. "Eli needs me. He needs me to be strong." Sometimes, on her break, Lila would sit in the diner kitchen with a cheap cup of coffee. She would think about the past, remembering her parents' words, "Life will test you, but don't let it defeat you." Lila knew that she had to keep going for Eli. He was the reason she fought every day. One evening, the bell on the diner door rang, pulling Lila out of her thoughts. She had just finished cleaning a table by the window when she looked up and saw someone walking in. He was tall, with broad shoulders, wearing simple clothes and huge sneakers. But it wasn't his clothes that made everyone stop and stare. It was him, Shaquille O'Neal, the famous basketball player. Lila didn't need to be a huge basketball fan to know who he was. Shaq was a giant, not just in size but in the world of sports. Lila remembered watching him with her dad when she was younger. They would sit in front of their little TV at home watching NBA games. Her dad would cheer and say, "See Shaq? It's not just because he's big. It's because he never gives up." Suddenly, memories of her father flooded Lila's mind. She had always admired Shaq and what he stood for. As she looked at him now, she couldn't believe he was in her little diner. Why would a huge celebrity like him come here? This diner was tiny, nothing fancy, and he could eat anywhere. Shaq walked to an empty table in the corner, nodding and smiling at the other customers. But his presence made the whole diner feel different. Everyone was watching him, but no one said a word. Lila quickly shook herself back to reality. She had to take his order. "Good evening," Lila said softly, trying to keep calm. "What can I get for you?" Shaq looked up, his eyes meeting hers. He smiled, not too big but enough to make her feel warm. "Good evening," he said. "I'll have a burger, medium, no cheese, and a black coffee." Lila quickly wrote down his order. It was a simple order, but to her it felt special. Why was someone like Shaq eating here? It didn't make sense. "Right away, sir," Lila said, trying to sound confident. But before she left, she couldn't help but sneak another glance at him. Shaq was already looking at his phone, not noticing the way everyone was staring at him. Lila went into the kitchen to prepare his order, still thinking about him. As she worked, she kept wondering why someone like Shaquille O'Neal would come to a small diner in a quiet town. What made him choose this place? Lila tried to focus on her job, but the thought of him kept lingering in her mind. When Lila brought the coffee to Shaq's table, her hands were still shaking a little. She placed the cup down in front of him and smiled. "Thank you," Shaq said. "Do you need anything else?" Lila asked politely, "Is it a busy night?" Shaq seemed to be thinking for a moment. "Not too busy," Lila said, trying to stay calm. "Evenings like this are usually quiet, but we always have to stay ready." Shaq nodded and smiled. "I can see you work hard. When I walked by earlier, I noticed how you move quickly between tables. You're friendly but not too much. Not everyone can keep that energy after a long day." Lila blushed. It was strange to hear such a big compliment, especially from someone like him. She wasn't used to people noticing how hard she worked. "Thank you," she said quietly. Shaq chuckled, smiling at her. "It's not easy, I know. But it's good to see someone who does their best." Lila felt proud of her work for the first time in a long time. Shaq made her feel good about the job she did, even though it was tough. "I guess you've been to a lot of places and met a lot of people," Lila said, trying to keep the conversation going. "This little diner might not be as fancy as other places." Shaq laughed. "Not everything has to be flashy to be special. I think this place is great. Like you said, it's quiet, but you can see how much effort everyone puts in." Lila smiled. Shaq's words made her feel important, like what she did mattered. But still, she wondered why he was paying so much attention to her. Shaq noticed her curiosity and smiled. "Don't mind me," he said. "Sometimes a guy like me likes to notice the little things. They can tell you more than you think." Lila smiled back softly. "Sometimes the little things are the most important." Shaq looked at her seriously, like he was thinking about her words. "You're right. It's those little things that will take you further than you imagine." Before Lila could respond, the chef called out that Shaq's burger was ready. Lila quickly walked away to get it. But as she carried the food back to Shaq, she couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. Something felt different. There was something special about Shaq, not just because he was famous, but because he cared enough to notice her. Lila had no idea that this night, this simple dinner with Shaq, was going to change her life forever. Lila had met all kinds of people in her job, busy workers, demanding people, and even famous ones. But Shaq was different. He didn't act like he was in a rush or like he had somewhere to go. It was like he was waiting for something, or maybe just taking his time. Lila tried to focus on her work, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. Why would someone like Shaq come to a little diner like this? And why did it seem like he was paying so much attention to her? She remembered her dad. He used to say that Shaq wasn't just a great basketball player, but a really kind person. He helped others, and that made him even better than his strength. His words echoed in Lila's mind, making her wonder if Shaq was here for a reason. Maybe he saw something in her that she didn't even see in herself. Shaq finished his burger and sipped his coffee slowly, still sitting at his table. He didn't rush to leave. Lila noticed him looking at her again. This time she didn't look away. When their eyes met, he gave her a small, friendly smile. There was something in that smile that made Lila's heart beat faster. It was like he saw something in her that she didn't know was there. A kind of strength, but also some tiredness and maybe a little bit of hope. As the evening went on, the diner grew quieter. Most of the customers had left. Lila kept working, cleaning the tables, but she couldn't stop thinking about Shaq. He was still sitting there. Why wasn't he leaving? Finally, Shaq raised his hand and asked Lila to come over. He was big and his booth looked small next to him, but he looked calm. His coffee was gone, and only some crumbs were left from his burger. "Thank you for stopping by," Lila said, trying to sound normal. "Was everything okay?" Shaq looked at her, his smile warm. "Everything was perfect," he said. "That was the best burger I've ever had." Lila smiled. "Thank you. I'm sure the chef will be happy to hear that." But Shaq didn't stop there. "It's not just the burger," he said. "It's how you serve. You don't just bring food. You bring positive energy. That's not easy to do, especially when life isn't always kind." Lila froze for a second. She didn't expect someone like Shaq to see that. He looked at her with kind eyes, not with pity, but like he understood. He pulled out some money, placed it neatly on the table, and handed her a small folded note. "Keep the change," he said. "And read this when you have some free time." Lila blinked, looking at the money. "Are you sure? This seems like a lot more than your meal cost." Shaq smiled. "I'm sure. Consider it a thank you." Without saying anything else, he stood up, nodded, and left. The door chimed as he walked out, and the diner felt quieter. Lila stood still for a moment, still holding the note in her hand. She was confused but also curious. Why had he left her this note? What could it possibly say? She tried to stay calm, but her mind raced with questions. She wanted to open the note right away but decided to finish her work first. She tucked it into her pocket and got back to cleaning, but she couldn't stop thinking about it. When she was finally done, Lila took a moment in the small break room at the back of the diner. She sat down and pulled the note from her pocket. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The words were written clearly in big, strong letters. "Lila, I see how hard you work. You spread positive energy to everyone even though you carry your own burdens. You remind me of someone very special, someone who taught me that patience and perseverance can change everything. I don't know your whole story, but I see a rare strength in you. This is a small gift for you." Use it for yourself, your son, or for dreams you think are out of reach. People like you deserve to be seen, and I see you." Lila was shocked. She couldn't believe what she was reading. But then she noticed something else in the note. There was something else folded inside. She pulled it out and her heart stopped for a moment. It was a check for $10,000. She stared at it, not sure if it was real. This couldn't be real. The amount of money was so much more than she ever thought she would have. Her mind was spinning. And then she started crying. Not because of the money, but because of the words. Shaq had seen her. He had noticed everything she did and he appreciated her. For so long, Lila had been used to carrying everything on her own, trying to be strong. But now, for the first time, she didn't feel so alone. Someone cared. Someone understood. Shaq had chosen to help her not because she was special or famous, but because he saw the good in what she was doing. That made the gift even more meaningful. Lila sat there, holding the check in the note. She read the words again and again, especially the part that said, "People like you deserve to be seen." It made her feel like she mattered, like she wasn't invisible. That night, Lila knew things were going to change. Not just because of the money, but because she felt seen and understood. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel hope. Lila needed to talk to someone about this, so she called her best friend, Sophie. Sophie was the one who had always been there for her. "Sophie, can you come to the diner right now? It's really important," Lila said, her voice trembling. "Are you okay?" Sophie asked, sounding worried. "I'm fine, but also not really. Just come, please. I can't explain it over the phone." Sophie didn't ask any more questions. Less than 20 minutes later, she walked into the break room. "Lila, what happened?" she asked, sitting down across from her. Lila pulled out a chair and sat down across from Sophie, her hands trembling slightly. Sophie noticed the sadness in her friend's eyes and immediately asked, "Lila, what happened?" Lila stared at the table for a moment, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She picked up the note and the check that were lying in front of her and slid them across to Sophie. She didn't say a word. Sophie frowned as she took the note and began to read it. Her eyes quickly focused on every word. As she reached the end, her heart skipped a beat and she froze. She looked up at Lila in disbelief. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. She then picked up the check, her eyes widening as she looked back at Lila. "You're telling me this is from Shaquille O'Neal? The basketball legend, Shaq?" Lila nodded, her face full of both emotion and hesitation. "Yes," she said quietly. "He came into the cafe tonight. He sat over there in the corner and then he left. He left this for me." Sophie stared at the check in her hand, her mind struggling to comprehend what Lila was saying. She looked at Lila with disbelief. "Do you realize what this means, Lila?" Sophie said slowly, still absorbing the information. "This isn't just money. This is a chance to change your life. You and Eli can have a fresh start. A new beginning." Lila lowered her head, clasping her hands together tightly. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, unsure of what to make of it all. "I don't understand," she whispered, almost to herself. "Why would Shaq do this for me? I'm just a regular person. I'm not special. I'm just a waitress working hard every day." Sophie leaned forward, placing a comforting hand on Lila's shoulder, offering her the kind of support that only a true friend can give. "Lila, listen to me," she said gently, her voice full of warmth. "You don't have to be extraordinary to deserve this. What makes you special is what you do every single day. You work so hard, you take care of Eli, and you face every challenge without ever giving up. That's what makes you deserve this, Lila. You may not see it, but Shaq did. He saw what's inside you. You need to believe that you're worthy of this." Tears welled up in Lila's eyes as she looked up at Sophie. She shook her head as if she couldn't fully accept the truth of what Sophie was saying. "I'm scared, Sophie," Lila said, her voice cracking. "I'm scared that I'll mess it all up, that I'll waste this chance. What if I make the wrong decision?" Sophie smiled softly, her eyes filled with confidence. "You won't mess anything up, Lila," she said, squeezing her friend's shoulder gently. "You are the kind of person who always puts Eli first. You always try to make things better, even when it's hard. Shaq trusted you. He saw the person you are, the person that you sometimes forget to see in yourself. This isn't just luck, Lila. This is kindness finding its rightful place in the world. And that kindness is yours to keep." Lila sat up a little straighter, a feeling of lightness starting to replace the doubt that had been weighing her down. Sophie's words felt like a breath of fresh air, clearing the fog in her mind. Maybe Sophie was right. Maybe she didn't need to be afraid. Maybe she could believe in herself again. She nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "Maybe you're right," Lila said, her voice stronger now. Maybe I should stop doubting myself and focus on doing something good with this gift. Maybe I should use it to build a better future." Sophie beamed at her, proud of her friend. "That's the Lila I know," she said, laughing. "You can do it, Lila. You can use this opportunity to do something you've always dreamed of, or you can create something new for Eli's future. What matters is that you believe in yourself. You have everything you need." Lila smiled, feeling a flicker of hope deep inside her. The check on the table wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It wasn't just money, it was a symbol. A symbol of hope, a symbol of trust from a stranger who saw something in her. For the first time in a long time, Lila felt like she could do anything. She could change her life. Sophie's eyes sparkled as she looked at Lila. "So, what's your first plan?" she asked. "What are you going to do next?" Lila clutched the check tightly in her hand, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm not sure where to start," she admitted. "But I know one thing, I won't waste this kindness. I'm going to use it to do something meaningful." That night, Lila didn't just share her joy with Sophie. She rediscovered something that had been buried deep inside her for a long time: confidence. The confidence she had lost over the years but was now beginning to find again. As the sun began to rise the next morning, Lila sat at her kitchen table. The check and a note with inspiring words were in front of her. Her eyes were heavy with the tiredness of a sleepless night, but there was something new in her heart, a small spark of hope. For hours Lila had been thinking. She thought about all the hardships she and Eli had faced, all the bills she had struggled to pay, and all the dreams she had set aside. She had never allowed herself to dream for herself, only for Eli. But now, with this unexpected gift, she could dream again, not just for Eli's future but for hers as well. "I can't let this gift go to waste," Lila whispered to herself, her voice full of resolve. She knew that this wasn't just about paying off bills or getting by. This was a chance to build a future that she and Eli could be proud of. Lila decided that the first thing she would do was take care of the basics. She used part of the money to pay off her debts, the rent, the utilities, and all the bills that had kept her awake at night. Then she brought her old car, which was always breaking down, to a mechanic to be repaired. She didn't want to worry about it breaking down while she was taking Eli to school. But the most important decision was yet to come. Lila had always dreamed of going back to school. She wanted to be an accountant, a career she believed would bring stability and a better life for her family. But life's challenges had forced her to put that dream on hold. Now, with Shaq's gift, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could return to school and make that dream come true. The next day, Lila found herself standing outside the gates of the local community college. It was a place she had passed by countless times but never dared to enter. But now, with the gift she had received, she felt like she was standing on the threshold of a new chapter in her life. Her heart was racing, but not from fear. This time it was excitement. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, gripping her purse tightly. As she walked through the busy hallways of the college, Lila felt a mix of emotions. She couldn't remember the last time she had been this nervous but also this hopeful. When she reached the admissions office, she was greeted by a friendly counselor. "Good morning. How can I help you?" the woman asked with a warm smile. Lila took a deep breath to steady herself. "I would like to enroll in accounting," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The counselor smiled even wider. "You've come to the right place. We have a great program for students who are balancing work and school. Let me help you get started." Lila sat down and filled out the forms, her hands trembling slightly as she wrote. But with each form she completed, she felt closer to making her dream a reality. The counselor explained the tuition, the class schedules, and how everything worked. It all seemed so overwhelming, but Lila felt a new sense of excitement building inside her. She was taking the first step toward her future. When she left the admissions office, Lila stood on the steps of the college, looking out at the sunlight shining across the campus. Her heart was still pounding, but it was no longer from anxiety. It was from exhilaration. She wasn't just starting a new chapter for herself. She was doing it for Eli too. She was showing him that no matter how tough life gets, it's always worth chasing your dreams. Lila knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. She would have to balance her studies, her job at the diner, and caring for Eli. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped. She felt free. Shaq's gift had not only changed her financial situation but had also given her something even more valuable: belief in herself. Lila smiled to herself, knowing she was ready for whatever came next. When she arrived home, Lila was tired but full of excitement. She opened the door to find Eli sitting on the rug, playing with his toys. When he saw her, he ran to her with a big smile. "Mom, you're home," he said, throwing his arms around her. Lila hugged him back, feeling the weight of the world lift off her shoulders for a moment. She sat down on the floor with him, a sense of calm and determination settling in her heart. "Eli," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." Eli looked up at her, curious. "What is it, Mom?" "I've made a decision," Lila said. "I'm going back to school. I'm going to study accounting, just like I've always dreamed." Eli was quiet for a moment as if trying to understand. Then his face lit up. "You're going to school like me?" he asked, his voice full of excitement. "You're going to do homework?" Lila laughed, feeling a warmth in her heart. "That's right, sweetheart," she said. "I'll have to do homework just like you. But I'm doing this so I can give you a better future." Eli's eyes shined with pride. He threw his arms around her again. "You're the best, Mom. I'm going to tell all my friends that my mom is going to be the best." Lila's heart swelled with love. She had never realized how much her actions could mean to Eli. He wasn't just happy for her, he was proud of her. He believed in her just like Sophie had. Lila smiled, feeling a new sense of purpose and hope for the future. That night, after Eli had fallen asleep, Lila sat at the kitchen table making plans. She was going to have to rearrange her shifts at the diner to make time for school, and she would need to find someone to look after Eli while she was in class. But as she sat there, writing down her list, another thought quietly took root in her mind. Eli didn't just need a mom with a better job, she realized. He needed to see that no matter how hard life gets, you can still dream. You can still work for what you want, no matter the obstacles. Lila understood now that the choices she was making weren't just for herself. They were for Eli too. She was teaching him a lesson that would last a lifetime. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Lila began studying for school, arranging her shifts at the diner, and finding someone to help watch Eli. He often sat beside her while she read or wrote notes for class, sometimes pretending to do his own homework. "Mom, can I be an accountant like you?" he asked one day, his eyes shining with hope. "You can be anything you want to be, sweetheart," Lila replied, smiling at him. "As long as you try hard and never give up." Eli nodded enthusiastically, his eyes full of determination. Lila knew that no matter how difficult things got, every step she took toward her dream would show Eli that anything was possible if you worked hard enough. One afternoon, Lila was in a grocery store picking up dinner when she saw a young woman struggling to pay for a carton of milk. The woman pulled a few crumpled bills from her wallet, but it still wasn't enough to cover the cost. Lila stepped forward without thinking. "I'll cover it," she said, offering to help. The woman looked at Lila, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what to say." "There's no need to say anything," Lila replied with a kind smile. "Sometimes a little help can make a big difference." After that moment, Lila realized something important. The kindness Shaq had shown her wasn't just meant for her. She could use the gift to help others too. And so she did. Every time Lila thought of Shaq, she remembered how kind he was to her. If Shaq believed in her, why shouldn't she believe in others too? Lila realized that kindness wasn't just about getting something nice, it was about giving it to others. Even small acts of kindness could spread and make a big difference, just like Shaq's kindness had changed her life. One evening, after Eli had gone to bed, Lila sat at her desk and started writing in her journal. She wrote down every small act of kindness she had done, not to brag, but to remind herself how important it was to be kind. Shaq had started a chain of kindness and Lila decided to keep it going. She didn't know if the people she helped would remember her, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that kindness had the power to change lives. With each kind thing Lila did, she felt closer to her dream, not only to be a strong mom but to help others too. Lila felt connected to Shaq, herself, and all the people she was helping. It was like an invisible chain that spread kindness to make the world better, one small act at a time. After that, Lila's life started to change. She found ways to balance her part-time job with her college studies. Her busy days didn't make her feel tired anymore. Instead, they gave her new energy. Every morning, Lila would drop Eli off at school, then go to her classes, work at the diner, and at night she'd study. Eli saw how happy she was. He didn't just notice his mom was busier. He noticed she was smiling more. One day, while they were cleaning up his schoolwork, Eli said, "Mom, you smile a lot more now." That made Lila smile even more and she felt warm inside. Every day she felt thankful, not just for Shaq's generous gift but for the small steps she was taking toward her dreams. Going back to college was hard, but each class and homework assignment brought her closer to her goal. One night, after Eli had fallen asleep, Lila sat at the kitchen table. The soft light from the lamp lit up the room, and as she flipped through her notebook, her eyes stopped at something hanging on the wall. It was the check Shaq had given her. She had framed it to remind herself of how one kind act had changed her life. Lila stood up and walked over to the frame. She gently touched the glass and thought about the night Shaq came into the diner. She remembered his calm voice, his kind eyes, and the encouraging words he said to her. The check wasn't just money anymore. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that someone believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Eli was also inspired by his mom. He told his friends at school how amazing his mom was, how she went back to college and worked hard on tough homework. "My mom is amazing," he'd say. Hearing those words made Lila feel like she was doing the right thing. She wasn't just changing her life. She was showing Eli how to never give up and work hard for what you want. One day, while cleaning the house, Lila found an old notebook from when she was younger. It had all her dreams written in it. She smiled when she read them. Become an accountant, buy a small house for me and my son, make a difference in the community. She realized she was starting to make those dreams come true, not because of luck, but because of Shaq's kindness and her own hard work. That night, as Lila sat on the couch watching Eli play, she thought about Shaq's gift. "Shaq gave me a chance," she thought. "Now it's my turn to make the most of that chance." It wasn't just about saying thank you. Lila knew she had a responsibility to keep working hard, not just for herself but for Eli and everyone she could help in the future. Every day reminded her that kindness, no matter how small, could change lives. One morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, making everything look warm and cozy. Lila sat at the table, sipping her coffee. She looked at the check hanging on the wall. Every number and word on it reminded her that everything she had now was because of kindness, hard work, and the trust someone had placed in her. She wondered, will Shaq ever come back to the diner? Every time the doorbell rang, she hoped to see him again. But even if he didn't come back, Lila knew he had already become an important part of her story. Lila's life was no longer just about getting by. She loved her job at the diner, and she was making good progress in her college studies. She was confident as she solved math problems, realizing she could do more than she had ever thought. Eli was also happier. He was proud of his mom and learned from her that no matter what happens, you can always try your best. One evening after they finished their homework, Eli turned to her and asked, "Mom, do you think I can do big things like you?" Lila smiled and brushed his hair. "Of course, Eli. You can do anything if you believe in yourself and never give up." One night, as Lila finished cleaning up at the diner, she looked outside. The street was quiet and the lights were dim. She thought about the night Shaq came into the diner and changed her life. Her heart filled with warmth as she remembered the note he gave her that said, "You deserve to be seen and appreciated." Now she understood what those words meant. They weren't just something from a famous person. They were a truth for everyone. Everyone, no matter who they are, has value. That night, Lila went home and sat at her desk. She opened her notebook and began to write her story. She wanted to remember everything, from the hard times to the moment when Shaq changed her life. She also wanted to inspire Eli and anyone else who needed hope. When she finished writing, she looked at the check on the wall and whispered, "Thank you, Shaq. You didn't just see me. You helped me see myself. I promise to keep spreading that light." Lila turned off the light and walked to Eli's room. She stood by his bed, watching him sleep peacefully. Everything felt right in that moment. Lila knew her journey wasn't over. She still had challenges ahead, but she was ready. With Shaq's kindness and the belief she had in herself, Lila was ready to face whatever came her way. She wouldn't just live a better life, she would help others do the same. Lila's story shows us how one simple act of kindness can change everything. From Shaq's kindness, she found strength, and now she was ready to spread that same kindness to others. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.